Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're diving into something incredibly fascinating. Stand-up comedian Anubhav Singh Bassi recently dropped some phenomenal material reflecting on his massive North American tour. But if you look closely, this is way more than just a comedy routine. What he's actually handed us is a highly structured, incredibly fast-paced sociological case study of the modern Indian diaspora experience. We're calling it the Desi in Videsh framework. Let's get right into it. To set the stage, Bassi asks his fans a wonderfully simple question. You keep messaging me to come to the US and Canada. Who is going to tell me not to come in this weather? I mean, this single line just perfectly validates the exact frustration of literally every single non-resident Indian who has successfully lured their friends or family over to the freezing West while completely omitting the harsh reality of the climate. It's the ultimate betrayal by your own friends.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. North American Winter Shock, the physical realities of tour life.
Minus 25 degrees Celsius. Yeah, that is the actual bone-chilling temperature he experienced firsthand in Calgary. He talks about stepping outside, seeing his hotel balcony completely frozen solid, while the locals are just out there casually walking around in hoodies like they're shooting a movie. The shock was so severe that his genuine, serious advice to travelers is to absolutely avoid what he calls poisonous and cursed cities. He specifically calls out places like Detroit and Raleigh, warning people like, do not wander in there unless you are fully prepared for the sheer hostility of the cold.
And making that freeze even worse is this totally absurd weather app metric, feels like. Bassi hilariously deadpans that this little feature essentially exists just to tell you that you are currently dying, totally regardless of what the actual thermometer says. And what's wild is how the locals react to it. You tell them you're freezing, and they just casually wave it off, like, just wait, it's gonna get worse. He makes a fantastic, totally logical point here. If you're already freezing in the present moment, why on earth would you care about how cold it's going to be in the future?
Moving right along to Section 2, Cultural Encounters and Police. Smiles, sirens, and suspicions.
So why are strangers smiling and asking, how are you doing? Now, to a North American local, that's just Tuesday. But to Bassi, it was a source of total, absolute confusion. Why is this person smiling? Why are they greeting me? He points out that the cultural translation of a friendly greeting like that simply doesn't exist in the same way back home. If you're walking down the street in Delhi and you just randomly start smiling at strangers, you are for sure going to get accused of being completely crazy or, they'll think you're plotting to kidnap them.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate culture shock, law enforcement. You've got North American cops who are heavily armed, carrying this massive amount of gear, which Bassi jokes he would absolutely forget at home every single day if it were his job. But here's the catch. Despite being armed to the teeth, they are terrifyingly polite. They come up asking, "Sir, may I have your license, please?" Contrast that with Indian cops. I mean, forget the handcuffs. They are so laid back they will literally interlock fingers and hold hands with thieves just strolling down the street together, and the thieves completely cooperate. It is a night and day comparison of how authority operates.
Next up, Section 3, Surviving the Stand-Up Tour. Health, Logistics, and Audience Management. 3,000 rupees. That is the price of a hot water flask he picked up in New Zealand, and it very quickly became his absolute most prized possession. Why? Well, because protecting his voice is literally his entire livelihood. He recounts this terrifying time he completely lost his voice while touring in Rajasthan. He went to a doctor in Delhi who super unhelpfully just told him to, quote, stay quiet for 7 days. So this 3,000 rupee flask is essentially his vocal insurance policy, keeping his throat warm during every single show on the road.
But professional doctors weren't his only source of medical remedies. When he was sick in his bachelor pad back in Delhi, a place where he vividly notes every single open container is basically used as an ashtray, his parents actually came over to take care of him. And their solution to his throat infection? Rubbing Vicks Vapor Rub directly into his thick chest hair while he was sleeping. He spent 3 days walking around with a burning chest. It's this hilarious specific trauma, but it's a perfect illustration of how extreme Indian parents' home remedies can be, even when you're a fully grown adult.
Listen, a performer absolutely needs focus, which brings us to Bassi's very strict live show rules. Put your phones down. No live recording allowed. Stop making distracting stories. And photos happen after the show. Honestly, consider this a formal public service announcement for all audiences out there. He really emphasizes that these rules are actually for the audience's own good, and, let's be real, for his onstage sanity. Because if you're busy filming a social media story, you're not actually present for the comedy, and you are actively distracting the guy who's just trying to make you laugh.
Actually, scratch that. Let's completely shatter a myth right here. People tend to think that after a massive international show, comedians are heading off to these glamorous, underground VIP parties. The reality? Picture this. You've got a 17-kilo bag and a 30-kilo bag, and you are facing the singular, exhausting goal of making both bags exactly 24 kilos. The post-show reality isn't a party at all. It's just a desperate mathematical puzzle of balancing international luggage weights so you don't get slammed with extra fees at the airport.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is the crowd control logistics. Bassi actually brought a guy over from India specifically to point a heavy-duty laser at audience members who were distracting him. But the difference in tech is staggering. An Indian laser pointer, that thing covers the whole auditorium and genuinely carries a blindness risk. But because of incredibly strict safety rules in the US, his heavy-duty enforcer laser was essentially banned. Their New York replacement? A literal happy birthday laser. It's completely safe, has absolutely zero range, and rendered his whole crowd control strategy entirely useless.
All right, on to our final segment. Section 4, Bizarre Rules and Alerts. The daily absurdities of the West.
Just take a look at the streets. North American ambulances have these soul-shaking, terrifying sirens that could practically cause a heart attack on their own, but citizens respectfully give way. Delhi ambulances, on the other hand, they are largely ignored by the public. In fact, local boys will literally tailgate the ambulance on purpose just to use it as a VIP pass to skip heavy traffic. It's such a fascinating, stark contrast in everyday civic behavior. Then there's the housing infrastructure. Bassi calls them thermocol houses. Now, thermocol is a term often used in India for styrofoam, so he's really poking fun at the lightweight wooden construction of American houses. For a touring team, any sense of privacy is an absolute myth in these places. He expresses this sheer, deep frustration that if he's trying to sleep on the ground floor, every single footstep from his team walking around upstairs sounds like someone is beating a heavy drum directly on his chest. But I gotta say, absolutely nothing compares to the sheer terror of experiencing an Amber Alert for the first time. Imagine this exact scenario. You are sitting in a restaurant in Texas. You and your team are carrying two highly suspicious, oversized, exactly 24-kilo bags, and suddenly, every single phone in the entire room starts blaring a soul-piercing alarm about a kidnapping. Bassi breaks down the absolute terror of this moment, realizing that sitting there next to those massive bags, they looked exactly like people fleeing a major crime scene.
As we wrap up this explainer, there's one interaction that just perfectly sums up the whole global touring gig. Despite traveling the world, selling out venues, and performing to massive crowds, international fame is still incredibly localized. A random guy in Australia actually walked right up to him and asked, "Are you the guy who takes a mic and gives sermons?" Not a famous comedian, right? A wandering preacher. It just goes to show that no matter how far you travel, you are always going to face hilariously vague recognition.
Which brings us to our final thought today. Is international travel really about expanding our horizons, or is it just finding new ways to appreciate the chaos of home? It's a pretty provocative question, isn't it? Because all of these culture shocks, from the freezing temperatures and polite cops to the paper-thin walls and blaring sirens, they ultimately just hold up a mirror to the wonderful, familiar chaos of where we come from. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this leaves you eager to examine your very own Desi in Videsh stories. Catch you next time.